Good evening, students. My name is Mr. Boudreau, and today I'm going to be running through a recap of all of the regions. We're going to throw together all of the different materials, the different resources that we have in each area, the different big cities, as well as how the geography is in each one. So let's get rolling with the mountains and basins. The mountains and basins have one large city, and that is El Paso, which is the pass to the west. So go ahead and write El Paso in big letters, and if you would like, also make sure you got a little arrow heading westward. So that's the only big city in the mountains and basins, the only major city. The mountains and basins also have a very easy way to remember their geography, as is part of the name. They do have mountains. And also remember, though, that they have desert valleys. Now, the reason I want you to remember that is because it's not just a mountainous area. It also has a lot of deserts. This is the start of the Mojave. You want to make sure that you're remembering that the desert starts here. Next up, we want to talk about rainfall. Mountains and basins gets very little rainfall. They get less than 12 inches of rain every year. So that's not much, just a couple drops. Finally, let's talk about resources. We've got two big ones here. We've got oil and gypsum. I always start with oil first because we're going to have that in every single area. Okay, next up, let's move to the Great Plains. The Great Plains have a little bit more rainfall than the mountains and basins do. They end up with about 15 to 31 inches of rain every year, which is, again, a little bit more than the mountains and basins, at least to start with. In order to remember the geography here, you just start by underlining the GR of Great Plains, because for Great Plains we've got GR for grassland. And in addition, we have rolling plains. These are basically just grasslands on hills, so keep in mind that it's not all flat in the Great Plains. They do have hills and they have a few canyons, like the Palo Duro Canyon. For big cities, an easy way to remember this is as long as you remember Amarillo, you'll be fine. So start off with Amarillo. And after Amarillo, you do the same thing that we did up here with Great Plains, except you do it for both sides. So the A is for Amarillo, the M is for Midland, the L is for Lubbock, and then the O is for Odessa. So the A is for Amarillo, the M is for Midland, the L is for Lubbock, and the O is for Odessa. So AMLO altogether, you've got every major city that we're talking about in the Great Plains. After that, make sure you hit your resources. Again, start with oil always. And for the Great Plains, we'll talk about why later, but I'd like you to start with all of your energy resources. So you have oil, you've got natural gas, and you have coal. So keep those at the bottom, and then on top of them, go ahead and make sure you remember gypsum. If you notice, the mountains and basins, as well as the Great Plains, share gypsum as a common element. Gypsum is a type of mineral that we use for a lot of things, for drywall, plastering, and we also use it for fertilizer. It's a very soft mineral. It's fairly rare. So go ahead and draw gypsum between the two of them. After we finish with the Great Plains, let's go ahead and move on to the North Central Plains, the NCP. For rainfall, they get a little bit more than the Great Plains do. They get 35 to 50 inches of rain every year. So they've got quite a bit more now. For the geography here, you want to make sure that you understand that the Great Plains, they've got some rolling plains, they've got some grasslands, they've got some canyons, but the North Central Plains is where you get a very hilly, forested area. And as you go further north, you're also going to make sure that you think about the Red River here, because the NCP borders the Red River up at the top of Texas, if you remember from your hand. So you want to make sure that you know, because the Red River is red, because of red clay soil. NCP has red clay soil. Next up, you want to remember all of your big cities. So we start off with Dallas and Fort Worth. And then there's two more. You have Abilene and Wichita Falls. Okay, let's talk resources. We've got two things. As always, we have oil, and finally we have lumber. If you remember, because it's very forested. Okay, now we finally arrive at the coastal plains. The coastal plains are where we live, and here we have a lot of rainfall. We're getting between 20 and 58 inches of rain every year. So either we kind of get a little bit less than these two, or we get a little bit more, which leads to a lot of flooding. If you want to remember kind of the order in which they go, the rainfall is kind of predictable. Take your blue marker, and you're going to number it off. Coastal Plains has the highest potential. The Northern Central Plains has the second highest. The Great Plains has the third highest. And then the Mountains and Basins has the lowest, number 4. So going counterclockwise, you have 1, 2, 3, and 4. It kind of helps you keep it in a row. Next up, let's talk about our geography. The coastal plains right next to that Gulf Coast have a lot of rivers, streams, and marshes. This leads to very fertile land, so you get a lot of crop growth down here. So make sure you know that these rivers, streams, and marshes lead to very fertile soil, lead to some crops. Next up, let's talk about the major cities here. The coastal plains is the most densely populated region out of all of the regions of Texas. We have the biggest cities and most of the major ones. But just remember, every once in a while in city, people can be a little bit like hags. Well, if we remember hags, we can remember our big cities down in the coastal plains. We have Houston, we have Austin, which is our state capital, so go ahead and put a few stars next to that. We have Galveston, which I'm sure most of you have visited at some point. And then finally we have San Antonio. San Antonio is a place where we have a lot of Texas history monuments. It's got also the boardwalk. It's a pretty cool place. But if you notice, a lot of the history and a lot of our big major cities, our biggest, most densely populated cities, are down in the coastal plains. And part of this has to deal with the fact that we have these rivers, streams, and marshes that lead to all of these crops being able to be grown. After that, let's talk about our big natural resources. We've got our energy ones first. So let's talk oil, natural gas, and coal. This is the exact same as the Great Plains right above. So remember, when you're pyramiding for each one of these resources, it's because we've got these two pyramids right here. Let's talk about their different ones though. Just like Great Plains has gypsum and the Coastal Plains doesn't, the Coastal Plains have a lot of resources that the Great Plains don't quite have. We have a lot of salt here. We have some iron ore. And we have lumber. And just like gypsum up here that's shared between the two, we do have lumber shared between the North Central Plains and the Coastal Plains. So if you'd like to draw a tree to kind of help remind you of that, that'd probably be a good thing to do between the two of these. So there you have it. These notes, if you've been following along with me, should help you out a little bit if you've been struggling to remember. I'm going to leave them here for just a few seconds. Go ahead and make sure you've got everything you need. Remember, there is a quiz this Friday over the regions, and our test is next Friday, the one after our holiday. I hope you all have a great evening, and I will see you in class and the next time I have a video up.